Week 14 of the fantasy football season. And here's a few quarterbacks I looked at off the wire this week. The first guy, Gardner Minshew of the Indianapolis Colts. So Gardner Minshew, he's been on this list a lot this season, and he's playing good football for this 7-5 Indianapolis Colts team. So him and Michael Pittman have a great rapport. You have a solid running game with Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor once he comes back into the lineup. And even guys like Alec Pierce have emerged over the last few weeks. So the last few games here for Gardner Minshew, he's gone out there and put in serviceable performances. Week 12 versus Tampa, 251 pass yards, interception, 6 rush yards, a rushing touchdown. And Week 13 at Tennessee, 312 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and a fumble loss. So Minshew, we know he's a gunslinger. We know he does turn the football over at times as well at a decent rate. But this week here with a good matchup at the Cincinnati Bengals, I give up the 12th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. And Minshew's feeling comfortable in this offense and playing well. And when you got a number one wide receiver like Michael Pittman, you could put up fantasy points pretty decently. So this week, well, he's available right now in 77% of fantasy leagues. I would give him an ad this week. The next quarterback staying in the same division, Will Levis of the Tennessee Titans. Will Levis, we know he's a rookie. We also know he plays behind one of the worst offensive lines in all pro football, but this kid's got a great arm, and it's about getting that second touchdown for Will Levis, because he does get a touchdown per week. The yards have been pretty decent, and if he could just find that second touchdown weekly, he could get 19, 20 fantasy points. So the last few weeks for Levis, Week 11 at Jacksonville, 158 pass yards, 2 touchdowns in that one, a fumble loss. Week 12 versus the Panthers, 185 pass yards. And then Week 13 versus Indianapolis, 224 pass yards, a touchdown, and a fumble loss. So Week 14, it's going to be a game at the Dolphins. We're going to be trailing early and often, obviously, is this Tennessee Titan team. And we don't know if it's going to be Derrick Henry even playing in this game after he left with a concussion, even though it gets the extra day with this game being on Monday Night Football in Week 14. But right now, like I said, Will Levis has a big arm. He's got DeAndre Hopkins, who could still go out there and make some plays. And I think next season is where Levis really could take off. But right now, down the stretch, towards the end of the year, I think he's a quarterback that could help fantasy owners, or a guy just to stash and see what he could do for the remainder of the season, especially in keeper and dynasty leagues. Available in 81% of fantasy leagues. Next quarterback's Joe Flacco of the Cleveland Browns. So Flacco, he's been sitting on the couch the whole season until Week 11. This Brown team did sign him to a practice squad deal, and now Flacco, he had to start in Week 13, and he kept his team into the game until there was 4 minutes left, and then the Rams scored a touchdown, then another stop on a turnover and a touchdown. But Flacco went out there, he showed good arm strength, even with Amari Cooper out leaving the game with a possible concussion. He went out there and had a decent performance, 254 pass yards and 2 touchdowns with an INT. So Week 14, a decent matchup on paper versus Jacksonville Jaguars. I give up the 3rd most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So we don't know if it's going to be Thompson Robinson or Joe Flacco, but like I said, Flacco showed good arm strength. He had poise in the pocket, and this offense was actually moving the football. So right now, if you need a quarterback in 2 quarterback leagues, the deepest of leagues, he's available right now in 95% of fantasy leagues. The next quarterback's Joshua Dobbs of the Minnesota Vikings. So Dobbs, he took the league by storm over the last few weeks before that bad performance in one of the worst Monday night games you're going to see in Week 12 versus the Bears, where he only had 185 pass yards, 4 interceptions, and a touchdown. But Week 14, coming off a bye, getting more comfortable with the playbook and his new teammates, I think Joshua Dobbs could bounce back, and it's a pretty good matchup at a middle-of-the-pack defense, another indoor game, which obviously is always a plus at the Vegas Raiders. So Dobbs has great weapons, obviously. Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and now to get Justin Jefferson back after the bye week is going to be a huge plus. So right now, Dobbs available in tons of fantasy leagues at 55%. After he got dropped in 30% of fantasy leagues during his bye week, and he's definitely a quarterback I would go out there and add this week for fantasy owners. And the 5th and final quarterback I looked at off the wire this week here is Jake Browning of the Cincinnati Bengals. So obviously, time of recording this video, this Monday night game didn't go down with the Cincinnati Bengals yet and the Jacksonville Jaguars. But Jake Browning, in the 2 outings we've seen him so far, Week 11 at Baltimore, 68 pass yards, a touchdown, 40 rush yards. In Week 12 versus the Steelers, a good defense, 227 pass yards, a touchdown, and an INT. So right now, we'll see what he does on Monday night here tonight at the Jaguars. Give up the 3rd most points to quarterbacks. And then Week 14, a good matchup versus the Indianapolis Colts. They give up the 14th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season as well. So he's got good weapons. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins back in the lineup, Joe Mixon in the backfield. And I think Browning could be a serviceable option in deeper leagues the remainder of the way, and he's available in 91% of fantasy leagues. So that's a few quarterbacks I looked at off the wire for Week 14 of the fantasy football season.